the Japanese police are more likely to believe the Japanese citizen, and they hardly take the side of foreigners. So, the Japanese people know this, and there are several schemes and scams that actually happen in nightlife around Japan, especially. And so they make a claim to the hospital, then they feign injuries, then they go to the police, and then you are now in Japanese prison. And the hospitality that you see or claim to have known about Japan no longer exists. All right? Konnichiwa, wagwan! And that's why
these are cons of living in Japan, specifically for others, and I'll also include some for myself. Japan is a very ableist country. It is not good if you require mobility aids. You will find that much of Japan is extremely inaccessible, and it's quite weird considering that they have an aging population that require mobility aids. I think that's a bit weird. Japan has a very strong history of imperialism, discrimination, racism that exists literally everywhere else in the world. Japan is also one of them. If you are SA'd in Japan, you will most likely not get justice. You will find that the salary here hasn't changed much in the last 30 years, especially for an English teaching salary. So if you expect to move up the corporate ladder, it's just not going to happen. If you don't speak Japanese, you will probably feel a bit lonely at times, and you probably won't be able to blend in with a lot of people. If you are black or a person of color, or if you have darker skin, then you will probably face some type of anti-blackness or colorism. A lot of the time, it's their first time meeting a black person, so, you just never know. If you are not petite, you will probably have a hard time taking public transportation, in addition to finding clothing your size. Even if you have bigger breasts, finding a bra might be more difficult for you. If you really like a specific type of cuisine that is not East Asian, then it's probably going to be hard for you to find or hard for you to enjoy. Housing discrimination does exist with foreigners. There's some landlords that simply will not rent to foreigners because of, bad vibes. Extreme misogyny, racism, imperialism, capitalism, all the isms exist within Japan as well.
Wanting to go to Japan is great and all, and I'm the type of person I want to move to Japan right now if I could, but it's not as easy. But it is important to talk about the dark sides, I guess, of Japan, because every country has pros and cons. It's not just, your ideal utopia, especially Japan is very idolized, and I get it. There's a lot of amazing parts and things about Japan that just people love, like anime, manga, the culture, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of things that aren't so great about Japan, and I feel like maybe it's time to talk about that. First thing that I can think of is the gender pay gap, and in general, just the gender discrimination in Japan is really, really bad. Like, women are just not seen as equal to men. They're just not. Like, it's like you're many years back in Japan, and just the fact that, women cannot get a high level position in most companies, or it's very, very uncommon still, is really, really sad. And just the pay gap difference also is huge. And just the way I've heard how women are treated in offices, like if they don't get married and have babies by the time they're 30, their boss will literally either push them to, hurry up, or I've heard stories of people even getting fired because they haven't fulfilled their female duties, like insane stuff. And that is one of the biggest things about Japan, that the whole, how men treat women there is bad. It's bad. And I am totally aware of it, because a lot of people in my post said, oh, you're so unaware of the problems in Japan. I am not unaware. I am very aware. And it is important to talk about it. But me as one foreigner, I cannot change that. It's something that they have to change as a country. Even if I speak about it, I don't have the power to change those things. It's just something I can make people more aware of, and that's really it. So, that's one really big dark side of Japanese society, I guess. Another thing is the whole sexual harassment in Japan is really on another level. Like, criminal activity is not bad in the sense that there's not a lot of theft, there's not a lot of things like that. No one's gonna snap your phone out of your hand and run away with it in Japan. I've never heard that happen or seen that happen. But there's a lot of sexual assault, sexual harassment, grapes like the fruit, I can't say the word. There's a lot of sexual harassment and everything that falls into that category that I can't say on TikTok without getting a warning. So that is a really big problem in Japan. A lot of women talk about these stories a lot. And it's funny, I made a video about it, and so many men, of course, said that that's not an issue and I'm talking BS. But like, why are there women trains? Explain that to me. Why is there a need for a separate train every morning on each train? The first and last one, I believe, is just for women. Why would they need that if men are so behaved in Japan? Because there's literally people taking pictures under skirts. There's people groping women on the train. It happens all the time. It happened to me. And like, people are like, oh, it's not true, Japan is so perfect. No, it happens, and it's a really big issue. Like I said, the crime rate in the sense of theft is low, but on the other hand, like, a lot of these sexual harassment crime rates are really, really high, and a lot of numbers aren't even disclosed because a lot of victims don't talk about it. And they don't talk about it because, this is another negative point in Japanese society, the whole shaming culture. Like, you're supposed to stay quiet. You're supposed to not say what you really feel. You're supposed to stay behind a mask and pretend everything's okay, because that's really something Japan is good at. And they have this honne and tatemae culture, where honne means to express your real feelings, while tatemae means to stay behind a mask and pretend, say something what you don't actually mean, right? And so a lot of people, have this tatemae, and they don't want to create a ruckus, they don't want to create a fuss. Like, it's called meiwaku kakeru, and a lot of people don't want to create that meiwaku, which means to basically means to cause trouble. And no one wants to cause trouble in Japan, because it's part of Japanese society to keep quiet and not make problems for other people, because it's a collective society. In Japan, it's always the group opinion over the individual's opinion. It's always the group's idea over the individual's idea. And that's one thing that, it can be a good thing in some senses. Definitely, I like this whole group dynamic in Japan, that you're always with people, but it's also very lonely on the other hand. That's another dark point about Japan. Like, it can be a very lonely country, and people underestimate it. I personally haven't experienced it yet, first of all because I have a lot of friends in Japan, so I never felt lonely, and also I am more or less an introvert, so I don't mind being by myself at all. And when I do want to be with people, I just hang out with people, or make friends. I don't struggle with that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, these are some of the points that I can think of right now.
Have you ever wondered what work-life balance looks like in Japan? Spoiler alert, is not all cherry blossoms and sushi. The Japanese work culture is notorious for its long hours, strict hierarchy, and high expectations. It's called karoshi, which literally means death from overwork. And it's not just about the hours. Commuting is another stressor. In major cities like Tokyo, Osaka, people often travel for hours in jam-packed trains, which adds even more pressure to their already stressful workdays. And Japan has one of the highest suicide rates in the world, and work-related issues are often cited as the major reason. In 2020, there were over 21,000 reported suicides, with over 2,000 cases identified as work-related. It's a heartbreaking reality we can't ignore. But there's hope. Japan's government has introduced measures like limiting overtime and promoting flexible working hours. Some companies have even started offering mental health support and encouraging employees to take the time off. Still, there's a long way to go, and it's crucial to foster cultures that prioritize mental health and work-life balance. Only then we can see a meaningful change in Japan.
Japan is not as safe as people say it is, especially for a woman, because tell me why 12 hours before I'm supposed to leave Japan, I decided I want to get some ramen. It's my last night there. I want to eat something good. I want to treat myself. It's midnight and I come downstairs from my hotel room. There's a row of restaurants, like everything's open 24 hours. One ramen shop, another ramen shop, another ramen shop. I decided to stop in front of this rice bowl place. I'm looking at their window, which has a big poster of their menu. I look to my left and I see a white guy. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, I don't see very many white people speaking Japanese. I'm just like looking at him from the corner of my eye. Keep in mind, he's like an old man. He's probably like 50 to 70 years old. I keep looking at the menu and he looks at me and he starts speaking Japanese and I'm like, oh, I can't speak Japanese. And he's like, oh, but you speak English, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay, like, where are you from? I was like, oh, SoCal. He's like, where in SoCal? Why does it matter? He was like, don't be vague, tell me exactly where specifically. I tell him the area I grew up in. He's like, no way, I went to Venice High School. Everyone at Venice High School knows about the high school that I went to. I was like, oh my god, no way, I went to blah blah high school. I saw it in his face, nothing clicked for him. He just ignored that sentence and he's like, you're lonely, I'm lonely, let me buy you dinner at this shithole. Those were his exact words. First of all, I'm not lonely. Second of all, that's weird, but whatever. In Japan, in a lot of places, you order from like kiosks. The kiosk will print out a receipt and you show that receipt to the waiter for them to bring out your food. This guy is trying to order at his kiosk. Thankfully, he's so old that he does not understand the technology, so he's like fumbling around. He's like, what do you want? What do you want? There's 2 kiosks across the restaurant. One's facing this way and the other's facing this way. So he's at the kiosk facing this way, looking back at me, being like, how do I do this? How do I press this button? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna try the kiosk over here. I walk to this kiosk. I'm looking over my shoulder to see what this man's doing. And he's so distracted by this machine. He's still facing his screen. I sprint out of the restaurant, run down the street, go to the restaurant at the very end of the block, rip back my jacket, put my hair up, order as fast as I can at this kiosk, get in the restaurant. I sit behind all these people so you can't see me from the window. I'm so scared that he's gonna walk by this restaurant and look inside and find me. After I finish my food, I walk outside. I look this way on the street. I see this man pacing back and forth outside the restaurant we were talking at, and that was like 30 minutes ago. Thankfully, his back's turned to me, and the restaurant I'm at is right at the corner, so I start running all over again, and this Japanese old woman is at the crosswalk. What the heck is this girl doing? Because people don't do that in Japan. Also, I have to say, this was my experience with a foreigner, but I've had some crazy experiences with all types of people in Japan, but it is very safe for men there. Incredibly safe for men. Women, keep your guard up. I literally felt like I was part of the CIA doing all my outfit changes and with my sprints and everything.
The Dark Side of Japan, Part 5. My name is Bacon and I'm a foreigner living in Japan for the past 6 years, and I'm here to just give you information of the dark side of what you don't see about Japan. Disclaimer, this is in no way me bashing the country, but simply enlightening those who are thinking of visiting or thinking of moving here for work. So, for my Part 5. Now, this problem might seem like it's not a huge problem, but the moment you come here, that's when you'll know that it's actually not a good thing. So people would decide to get married to locals from here. If you're a foreigner and then you decide to get married here, there's a high likelihood that if things don't go well with your partner, you will lose all rights to your child, whether you're the mother or you're the father, because law here only supports the locals. Yes, that's an advantage, but then let's look at the human rights part of it, where you are not even allowed to have visiting rights with your children. Now, if you read newspapers or if you even follow the news, 2021 there was an American man who did a hunger strike during the Tokyo Olympics because he had not been allowed to see his kids for more than 11 years. That's how bad it can get. And because the law will always support a local, it means you can actually get divorced without your knowledge. Your partner can literally go through the divorce process without you even knowing and making you sign. You won't even know it. That's how terrible it can get. And if you want to look this up, it's there on the internet, which I think that's very devious. That's very devious. And the other thing that I think that's my 8th point. What I don't like about Japan as well is the need to maintain superficial, fake, social harmony. Now, people always say people here are very harmonious, everything is done. Yes, we know it. Everything is orderly and stuff. But then it's all superficial. It's not really exactly what's happening. There's something called meiwaku. Meiwaku is causing disharmony. And this results in people making decisions which don't make sense. That's the wa. So when there's something called wa, that's wa is being thoughtful. So there are so many instances where people literally are attacked. Like I mentioned, like where women are groped in trains or something like that. People don't want to say anything because they are worried about meiwaku, or I don't want to inconvenience people. If I report this, it means the train is going to stop. Then everyone is late for work, which I find very abnormal. I'll give you a case in point, a true story that happened. 2021, a 14-year-old girl was being bullied and essayed by her fellow schoolmates to the point where this affected her so much, she took her own life. She unalived herself. The school principal, instead of showing, remorse for what the other students had done, went to tell the mother of the daughter that you're causing mewaku, telling her, you see, the life of one victim is not enough to destroy the life of 10 other victims. This infuriates me to the point where people want to maintain the fake social harmony. Oh, let me not report a crime because I don't want to inconvenience it. Just this year, a girl who was unalived by someone, she ran to a convenience store to look for help, and then the store clerk didn't do anything because he thought, oh my god, if I report this, that means the police will come. I'm causing maywork for the customers. How? Anyway, part 6 will come if you want it.
Japan is not safe for women or children. Japan has even less laws protecting children and women compared to back home. Honestly, they have even less laws compared to a whole lot of places. There are softcore corn magazines that include children as young as like 14, 16 years old, and they pass it off as simply modeling, like a fan book, when really it's a 14-year-old child covered in water or oil or soaked up in some sort of way in a school swimsuit uniform. There's a reason why there are women-only trains, which honestly we need back at home. Train carts specifically. I have had my own run-ins that while living in a co-ed share house, there was a Japanese man that was fairly creepy because he fetishized black women, had the jacked up box braids and everything. It was a situation, I'll tell y'all about that later. And not only that, but constantly having to worry about nampa, which I guess culturally for us back home in America or Australia or wherever, we would typically in English refer to it as catcallers. Which again, these issues are everywhere. However, Japanese men are being held less accountable than in comparison to back home and not just my home, but other people's homes as well, talking to other foreigners from English-speaking countries. Which says a lot because men are barely ever held accountable back home in America. It's the same thing in Korea. Men aren't really held accountable for the horrific things that they do. So they continue to do them. Who would have thought? These societies are incredibly patriarchal, and it's a part of why these societies are struggling so much. It's a part of why a lot of these men are struggling to get women, both native and foreign, to be with them. Politicians have suggested for maybe them doing some sort of classes that men can take to socialize them better and to being able to interact with women and children in a healthy way. But you also have to remember that a lot of these men know that what they're doing is very bad. So no amount of a class is going to make them not do the very bad thing. There needs to be laws in place to protect women and children in Japan.
You want to know the freakiest thing about living in Japan? As a woman, you get stalked.
The dark side of living in Japan, no one talks about. Japanese men do not believe in 50-50. They cook, they clean, and they all look so good. I met this guy like 3 weeks ago at a cozy cafe, and we're already moving in together. What really shocked me is how easy learning the language is. Like in 2 weeks, I was already having basic conversations. It's kind of like a puzzle. Once you get a few pieces, everything just clicks. Watch out for this. Tipping is considered rude in Japan. They think you're calling them homeless by offering money. I found out the hard way when I was almost kicked out of a restaurant for leaving a tip. Japanese food blew me away. It's so healthy, it's almost unreal. I've been eating twice as much as usual, but I still lost 15 pounds without even trying. Every single shower in Japan is required to have this water filter. It removes all the nasty stuff and harmful chemicals like chlorine and heavy metals, so instead of your skin feeling tight and dry after a shower, it feels soft, smooth, and refreshed. I swear to God, every time I take a shower here, it feels like a spa treatment. And my acne, which I've struggled with for years, cleared up in just a week. It's insane. My face feels like it can finally breathe, and my hair has never been softer or shinier. Why doesn't every shower in the US have this thing? I even spent $150.